Hi, it's Uncle Larry. Does the modern progressive left despise working people? Surely not, you say. I don't know. Today we're going to investigate why the modern progressive left appears to have abandoned the working class and even looks down its nose at them, while the right is stepping into the breach to speak for them. What an inversion! How on earth did this happen? I've already done video essays on the concept of wokeness and various aspects of identity politics, so I'm not going to repeat myself. But how did this disconnect between the new left and the working class and working poor actually occur? Let's look at a couple of the main reasons. First, this is the most obvious one. The divide may be fueled by a simple lack of representation of working class voices within progressive movements and institutions. When decision-making bodies are dominated by individuals from more privileged backgrounds, there is a risk of overlooking the perspectives and the experiences of working-class people. Another factor, this is bigger for me, the language used by progressives may contribute to the perception of condescension towards the working class. As professor and New York Times columnist David Brooks says, the very language of wokeness is a linguistic display of elitism. You have to have a certain level of education to be comfortable using certain expressions like intersectionality, problematic, trigger warnings, decolonization, and the 30-odd other words inside this club. Adopting this exclusionary language is a deliberate decision that the working class is not going to be in your world. Nowadays, progressives will talk about every form of privilege, power, and oppression under the sun, except class. The modern left appears to have migrated away from unions and workers' rights inside the faculties of our post-secondary institutions. At least it looks that way. Academics know way more about language than workers' rights, so language has become central to modern progressivism. And, of course, what happens inside the academy gets out into the broader culture within half a dozen years. Meantime, over in the media, the working class voices aren't being represented in stories that professionally trained, mostly urban journalists tell either. When the working class looks at the world through the media and doesn't see their world depicted in it, can you blame them for getting angry and frustrated? When you basically tell millions of people that their voices aren't worth hearing, can you blame them for looking to others who at least give the appearance of caring about them? Are you beginning to understand why Donald Trump is likely to be the next U.S. president, or why the federal Conservative Party in Canada is currently polling about 20 points ahead of the governing Liberals? Think about that. Then there's the unspoken part, which I will say out loud. The traditional role of center-left political parties in speaking up for the economically disadvantaged has been replaced with actual disdain and contempt for people who work with their hands for a living, people who work in goods and services, people who do the kinds of jobs we all rely on to survive. Their excuse for having abandoned the working class is this ridiculous notion that they're all racists or they're bigoted. What a lie. Now, I ran across this long thread from a struggling couple whose names I'll leave out, but I want to give you a synopsis. I ran across this the other day. Here it is. My wife and I keep cutting back, but we keep going further and further in the hole every month. Restocking the fridge and freezer is hundreds a month. Mortgage is up, taxes are up, fuel is up, carbon taxes are up, pile home maintenance costs, vehicle maintenance costs, and credit card interest rates on top of that. How is this possible? How in the bleep is this okay? It's getting to the point where I'm strongly considering becoming a criminal. We are working ourselves to the bone. I'm exhausted. I'm frustrated. I feel like I'm being crushed under a boulder at the bottom of a lake. I don't want to go on living like this. At least I know I'm not alone, but really, we all need to demand change. A majority of the population shouldn't have crippling anxiety and be contemplating ways out because we can't make ends meet working multiple jobs. He goes on to say, I guess birth rates will have to drop further and suicide rates will have to increase further before somebody actually does something. He concludes, it's like we're in a third world country in a first world costume. So, who's going to speak for people like that? Hey? Are their voices not worth hearing? Another struggling woman eloquently puts it this way: trigger warnings, safe spaces, microaggressions, unconscious bias, the language of therapy is now used widely and indiscriminately. We live in a time when hard-working people, making ends meet, stoicism, rationality are all seen as antiquated. Instead, we're encouraged to normalize eccentricities while endlessly focusing on our feelings and our emotions, our inner child, and self-care. More and more of us are scanning the broader society and seeing nothing but one big psych ward. Wow. Back to me now. I have said this before. If people down the economic and social ladder from you are the only ones bearing the brunt of your attempt to change the world, and then you have the audacity to turn around and ignore or even despise them, then your credentials, influence, and progressive status don't have much credibility. And people are right to be suspicious of you. It's not that those who are less well off don't care about important issues too. Of course they do. In the case of climate change, if you make energy alternatives cheap and affordable, people will flock to them. During a time of inflation, rising prices, the doubling of mortgage rates, out-of-reach rents, people can be forgiven for just trying to focus on keeping the lights on and the bills paid. Now, I've been reading a few observers who are saying that the progressive left slowly began to realize it had become unbalanced. This is about 18 months or so ago. That hyper-wokeness has actually peaked now. I'm not so sure about that. Regardless, the relationships of woke culture with everyday people has been so severely damaged that it's going to take a lot of time to heal. And in the meantime, the political right is making use of this divide and speaking directly to the economically disadvantaged. Why wouldn't it? Of course it would. And the extreme right is exploiting the divide, pandering to the lower classes for their own political advantage. Sadly, this never had to happen.